Thank you, Chuck. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Oh, you know I can do that. When you are an elementary art teacher, you teach every child in the school every week. That goes for the PE teachers, the music teachers, the librarian, or I'm supposed to say media specialists, right? And whatever the fifth one is, so that there's a special every day of the week, and all the teachers get their break at that point. They take their class to you, and then they have their time off. We call it the planning period. That's a euphemism, but anyway, I was an elementary arts teacher, and my classroom was a busy place. There were always a lot of supplies. There are crayons, there's ink, there are pencils, colored pencils, charcoal pencils. If you can think of a kind of pencil, it's in the art room. Paper, there's white paper and drawing paper and watercolor paper and colored paper, pastels and dark colors, construction paper. There's cardboard, there's clay, there are rags to clean up because I refused to waste paper towels. There's paper mache, there are sometimes things that are made of wire or plastic, and I have often made artworks with children from things that people throw away. So I love to do recycled and reusing the things for art. It's so much fun with the kids. They go, I can't believe I made this out of that. Sure. When you're the art teacher, you also teach the children who don't go to regular classes, who have what's called a self-contained class. And those classes usually have maybe 9, 10 children in them at tops. There's one for the children who are intellectually challenged, who aren't able to keep up with their grade levels curriculum. There is the self-contained class for the children who have emotional problems, and some of them are severe. There's a class for the children who have very large or severe physical problems that help them, keep them from being able to get around the way children most of the time can. And those children, when they come to an art class or a PE class or a music class, what they do is come 2 of them from their class with a class their age. Like say the 3rd graders, there'll be 2 kids from the emotional class, or there'll be 2 kids from the physically challenged class. And that way, all those children get taught, but the teacher who is teaching the specials, as they call them, also called co-curriculars, that teacher doesn't get the entire self-contained class added to another class, because that would make a lot of children in one class. Usually there are something like 25 in every class. Somewhere in the younger grades, they'll keep it down to about 20, 25 in regular classes. So you add 2 to that. If you add 10, ooh, that would be a lot for art class, let me tell you. Well, I got used to it. I got used to the children who were mainstreamed from the self-contained classes. And so did the children who weren't from a mainstreamed class. They were used to those kids coming in. They got to be friends with them. They interacted with them. They worked with them and sometimes helped them. It was lovely. I watched them and enjoyed that. Now, some of them would cause a disruption, the mainstream children. Of course, sometimes the children who weren't being mainstreamed would cause a disruption. That's a whole different thing. But I remember Daniel, for instance. Daniel had really, really bad emotional problems. And he didn't want to do almost everything that any teacher asked him to do. He was always going, no, 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 no. So he came to my classroom, and I just was as gentle with him as I could be, because as far as I'm concerned, I taught everyone and treated them the same as I taught everyone else. If you were in my class, you were a student who was going to learn something about art. And so with Daniel, I just spoke to him as gently as I could and dealt with him as gently as I could. But one day, Daniel was really on his top bad behavior. He was mad. He wasn't going to do anything I asked him to do. I had to tell him to sit down a couple of times. And he finally just, no, no, and he ran to the front of my room where I had a table that I kept some pretty things on. And he grabbed a statue, an angel reading statue that I had, and he smashed it into the ground. And it broke into a bunch of pieces. Luckily, the woman who was his one-on-one aide, and many of the children had those, called the office and had the disciplinarian come down, and he came and got the child and took him out, because sometimes you couldn't just keep him there. Then I remember the day that the self-contained teacher walked into my classroom just before the other class came, and she said, "Here's Emily, she's blind," and turned around and walked off. And I followed her down the hall. Whoa, wait a minute, come here. No. I said, what am I supposed to do with somebody who's blind? And this is art class. I said, the third graders today are going to take Sharpies, and they're going to do this artwork with lines that I'm teaching them. Oh, I don't care, just give her some clay, something tactile, she'll be fine. And then she walked out again. I said, "Hi, Emily." Emily just sat there. So when the class came and everybody was ready, I walked over, and because she couldn't do the Sharpie lesson, so I walked over and I gave Emily a lump of clay. Well, she promptly threw it on the floor. Her one-on-one aide had shown up. She said she was sorry she hadn't come with Emily, but she had to talk to this classroom teacher for a few moments. So she promptly threw it on the floor, and the one-on-one aide looked at me and she said, "Oh, she doesn't like it, it's cold." I said, "Well, clay usually is cold until you do something with it and warm it up with your hands." Emily refused to touch it. She says, "Well, she likes paper. You have any scrap paper?" Did I have any scrap paper? So I went and got her some scrap paper. And Emily proceeded for the rest of the class period to just tear the paper into little pieces. And guess what Emily did in my class every time she came to me after that? She tore paper. I had plenty of paper for her to tear. And she was, I guess, happy with that. I would have preferred for her to feel things and find out things, but that wasn't how it worked out for Emily. Then there was Skylar. Oh my. Skylar was the sweetest little 6-year-old boy, blonde, blue-eyed, just adorable to look at. Skylar was strange. Skylar would leave his seat in the middle of class, and he would begin to crawl around the floor. And you'd say, "Skylar, what are you doing?" "I'm looking for diamonds. I'm mining for gold." "Okay, Skylar." And sure enough, if he found a little bit of glitter on the floor, or a sequin, or a piece of brightly colored paper, and those were easy to find in the art room, of course, even in a corner of the room, and he would, I found it. So with Skylar, I would just say, "Come on back to your seat, sweetie." Well, one day I was teaching the class, and the kids were all enjoying what they were doing, and suddenly I noticed Skylar. I'd been working with a girl, and I looked and I said, "Where's Skylar?" And all the children looked at me and went. They didn't say a word. And sure enough, he was in the back part of the room where I kept a lot of supplies, and there were some tables and a soft area to sit on. And he was crawling around under one of the tables. looking for diamonds. And so I just scooted Skylar back to his seat. He was an easy kid to get along with. It was just strange. But the one I want to tell you about tonight specifically was Briley. When she came to Socastee Elementary School in Myrtle Beach, where I worked, she was 8 years old. Briley had been born severely affected by cerebral palsy. Let me say that right. She could not walk. She could not talk. She could make guttural sounds. She could not make a grasping motion with her hands. She could move her arms around, but she couldn't grasp things with her hands. She could hear and she could see. She was brought to my room in this contraption, the likes of which I'd never seen. It was like a big, soft, rolling high chair with a great big tray in the front. So that was good because then she could work on things the best she could. And she was propelled into my room by this lovely, large African-American woman named Miss Marquita. Miss Marquita smiled and rolled Briley into my room. And you might forgive me if I thought, what am I going to do with this one? But like I said, they all got treated like a student who could learn some art. And Marquita was more than helpful. She was so lovely. She would take Riley's hand and help her to do whatever we were doing. And you could see sometimes Riley would look at the paper and move her hands over it. But there wasn't much there. There were so many limitations to what she could or could not do. Mostly could not do. So I would talk to Miss Marquita and tell her what we were doing. And I always greeted Briley, but didn't get much response. Until one day, we were doing painting. All children love to paint. It's so instant. Color. Ooh, ah. And of course, I also teach that you don't go with a paintbrush because, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many paintbrushes I had that had maybe 2 more bristles left. So I would teach painting technique and the way you slide a paintbrush or dab with a paintbrush or sweep with a paintbrush. And we were using purple, orange, and green. Does anybody know the name of those colors? They're called secondary colors. Because
I like that.
Because the primary colors, first colors, are red, yellow, and blue. Everybody knows that, right? And when you mix the two of them, they come out with those other 3 colors. And that's why we were using those that day with a 3rd grade class. And Miss Marquita was I gave Briley and Miss Marquita their own little cup of paint as we went along. We started with orange. Briley pushed the paintbrush aside. Miss Marquita could tell you, oh, she in a mood today. And I would go, okay. But she pushed the brush aside. She didn't, no, orange, no. Green, we did green. Briley pushed the brush aside. Marquita looked at me, she went, oh. Purple. And I turned around and Briley was going all over her paper on the purple paint. Oh, it was beautiful. I was so thrilled because here was a response that I could actually measure. I said, oh, she likes purple. And Miss Marquita said, oh, yes, she does. She says, and she likes pink too. From then on, anytime Briley came to my room, she got purple and pink. No matter what we were using or doing, she got purple and pink in it. And she got to the point where she would smile. Sometimes it was hard to tell her facial expressions, but you could see a smile on her face. And she'd come in, I'd say, "Hey, Briley," and I'd get a smile and go, "Yes, yes." And Miss Marquita finally was saying to me, "She likes to come to art class, Miss CJ." That's what they called me. I didn't want kids to have to say, "This is Catton-Johnson." All my colleagues called me CJ. Nobody ever called me Donna. But at any rate, she goes, "She likes art class, Miss CJ. I can tell." And I'd say, "Hey, Briley, how you doing?" And she'd smile. Well, I used to see them from time to time in the hallway too. If I was in between classes and I'd be going to the restroom or something, I'd run into them walking through the hallway. And I'd always stop to chat. And I'd always say, "Hey, Briley, how you doing?" And she'd smile at me. Well, one day she went, and I looked at her, and Miss Marquita goes, "Oh," she said, "that's special. She's throwing you a kiss." Oh, my goodness. My heart was full. So one day I see them in the hallway, and I walk up and I say, "Hey, Briley, hey, Miss Marquita." Marquita goes, "Oh, she in a mood today, Miss CJ. I don't know." So I went up and said, "Hey, Briley, what's up?" She went, oh my goodness. So I talked to Miss Marquita for a moment or two, and then I said, "What you doing, Briley? Are you not talking to me today?" She went, I thought, my goodness. And it was time for me to get back to class. So I finished up my talk with Miss Marquita, and I said, "Okay, well, Briley, that's just fine. Okay, fine. If you're going to be like that, you don't love me anymore, I'm leaving." And so I started to walk away, and she went. And I said to Marquita, I said, "Oh my goodness." And she said, "She was teasing you." I said, "Yes, I can tell." Oh, that just blew me away. And I'll tell you what, it was hard sometimes to teach 700 children a week. And at the last year, it was 860 a week. And there were times when I was frustrated and irritated with the whole thing. But that moment is so special in my memory. And those two people are so special in my memory. And I don't know where they are. After Briley left the school, nobody told me where she went. I didn't see Miss Marquita again. But wherever Briley is, I'm figuring she's about 17 or 18 now. And I wish her well. And I don't know if Miss Marquita's still with her, but I wish her well as well. And honestly, to have received that kind of pure love from someone with so many limitations of having any way to show it will never leave me. Thank you. Thank you, Jack.